Friends, tonight we're building an aircraft. It's a B2 Spirit, but hear me out. We'll do a lot of interesting stuff. Some shading, texturing, sanding, and we'll also make a diorama for it with some interesting concrete effects and other interesting stuff. So buckle in, this is our captain speaking. Okay, I chose the Academy 1/144th scale kit because, look, you just have to glue the two halves and then you're good. But it has some other parts as well. These look nice, and also this has some fine detail. So let's get the two halves of the hull out of the sprue and glue them together so we can start painting. They fit like a glove, so I think we're good to go. Just kidding, or am I? You see, airplanes have an interior, and it has to be painted in advance. But don't get discouraged here, it's just a tiny piece, and nothing except the top of the dashboard will be visible. So I used it as a test bed for an interesting painting approach that I'll be applying to the aircraft itself. It was just a quick 1 hour speed paint, and I even scribbled some rudimentary control panels because why not? I used a panel liner to panel some lines, and we'll talk about this potion later. For now, this should be enough. I mean, this is the most we'll ever see of the cabin. So let's glue some more parts together, and here I had my first encounter with aircraft modeling, because if something doesn't fit like a Tamiya kit, you can't just hide it with a thick weld seam like on a tank. If a bit of brute force would solve the problem, then I used it, and instead of liquid cement, I employed superglue and drying accelerator. This way, the panel lines won't get covered with spilled plastic. The two halves of the main hull needed some pressure as well. I used the same approach as on plastic barrels on armor models. Clamped the halves together and then applied the plastic cement. The glacis didn't want to budge, so here I had to fill a pretty obnoxious step. Again, I used superglue because it's hard and durable, and I sanded it as best as I could. In fact, I sanded a lot of surfaces. Not saying I sanded them perfectly, but I did my best. Here's what I imagine to be a certified aircraft moment, when the glued parts create a step and the panel line is too epic. To fix the issue, I chose a razor saw and a scribing needle from Steady Tools. First off, I made sure the zigzaggy line was deep enough so it wouldn't disappear. Then I sanded the area, trying to level the step as much as possible. What couldn't be leveled had to be filled, and for this type of delicate work, I decided to use Mr. Surfacer 500. It dries fast, doesn't shrink too much, and is very soft, thus easy to sand. When the fixing was done, I went over the panel lines one more time with the needle. But the filled area was trickier, so I used the razor saw to draw straight lines, and after a few shallow passes, I enlarged them with the needle. This was a back and forth process, but I'll admit, it was pretty satisfying. I want all of you hardcore aircraft modelers to rate my scribing game in the comments, and subscribe if I did it right. If you're not convinced yet, let me show you that I also learned how to use a scribing tape. This one also comes from Steady, and oh my gosh, it's so stiff. But that's the whole point, of course. What worked for me the best was to start with super light passes, no pressure at all. And once there was a clear path for the tool, I started pushing more, and then I switched to the scribing needle again to enlarge the line. My scribe foo resulted in a few brand new panel lines that were missing, but I saw them in references. And when I made a mistake, and trust me, I made a lot of them, I just brushed some Mr. Surfacer and gently sanded the excess away. The best way to remove the dust, at least from what I've tried, was to use an old toothbrush and tap water. This did a pretty good job, but the deep cleaning was carried out with Mr. Cement S, carefully applied in tiny amounts into each panel line. Yes, I ended up rescribing the entire surface, because it was fun and it looked good. I can totally see the appeal of this technique. It's like welding for airplanes. Now, windshields are a scary thing. I need to wear gloves, that's how repulsive they are. I picked out the edges with a grayish AK marker, a super fast job, and after dry fitting it in place, it was time for magic. If you frequently work with clear parts and you haven't heard about Transpafix from VMS, then let me do some influencing. This is a very thick, tacky glue designed specifically for clear parts. It has a long working time, so you have a good hour to move your windshields around if you want to, but what's best, it doesn't fog up the clear plastic. You can be as messy as you want because the VMS Universal Weathering Carrier will clean it up. That's right, once the glue is dry, you can wipe all of the excess away with this fluid, and it won't damage the glass part. And that's pretty much it for the building part. Out of the box, no stress, no tryharding. The only missing thing was masking, and you know how much I hate this job. Luckily, the pre-cut tape that comes with the kit fits pretty well, and I learned that there's no science to it. You just have to make them fit properly yourself. So with that out of the way, I found out way too late that I don't have an aircraft painting stand. What a surprise. But because I'm from Eastern Europe, I managed to make one of the Octopus M2M attachments work. For priming, I chose aircraft grey VMS primer. See, it says aircraft on the bottle, and this is an aircraft. Obvious, right? So that's 2 smart potions from VMS for your modeling pleasure. So if you wanna snatch them, visit the affiliate links in the description to get them at a better price with the sales coupons. Thanks a lot because it helps me, and you can thank me later, or just like and subscribe. One thing I noticed after observing aircraft folks for 2 decades is that an aircraft model must be smooth. So I went over the entire surface with the sanding sponge, and I had a lot of mess on the model because I was kinda afraid to wash it in soapy water. With the B2's hull being smooth as a baby skin, I could start applying the pre-post shading. Judging by my reference images, I assumed the primary color is a zinc primer or some modern equivalent of it. This initial stage is only about blocking in the basic colors and shapes. The surface of the aircraft is totally messed up, and I needed some simplified starting point. In fact, while I'm doing this boring task, let me explain the weird color scheme. I did some quick digging and found the answer on Reddit of all places. This baddie's name is called B2 Test Article 0998 and it was photographed at US Air Force Plant 42 located in Palmdale, California. Test article probably means something like a paint mule because this article can't fly. Judging by the insane color scheme, if we can even call it that, I presume they're testing different camouflage paints and how they work against radar waves. Or something, I don't know, but it's a cool headcanon. It would be absolutely insane if someone who works at the plant would see this video and leave a comment with a better explanation, but I don't want to overestimate my reach. So anyway, that looks like a huge steaming pile, doesn't it? But it'll do the job. The next step is adding light pre-shading. Well, sort of. That's why I call this approach pre-post shading, because it kinda combines both approaches together. And on top of that, it goes against all conventions because instead of smooth airbrushing, it involves sponges and lots of textures. The technique is pretty fun at first, but if I'm honest, it gets old after you're done with one half of the hull. Of course, things can always get refined, and maybe I was overthinking the effect too much because of everything that will come later. But the baseline is to stipple the light textures with a sponge and acrylics, and then, if needed, we can refine them and smoothen them out with an airbrush. I didn't pull this method out of my orifices, I'm actually trying to follow a very cool approach developed by a great Hungarian modeler, Dr. Bera Karoli. So now I'm going to apply the dark textures. These new acrylic AK washes are basically contrast paints, and as such, they flow much better and don't leave tide marks. Excellent for smooth effects, even when our goal is to be quite harsh. But this time, I didn't do the same sponge first, airbrush later thing. The test article has lots of stains, color gradients and visible streaks of grime on the surface. Again, these are absolutely excellent for the job thanks to their flowing and drying properties. I was able to paint dirt gradients, very fine streaking effects, apply quick washes and whatnot. This medium just does everything. Just take note of this specific panel, which won't be too dramatic in the end, but I was surprised how many different effects can be done with one paint mixture. And I'm wondering how can this be adapted to armor models or facades. I think these will add a whole new dimension to streaking effects in particular. Okay, so this was quite fun, and let's now enhance it with an airbrush. Now, we're not CSI, so we can't just go enhance, enhance, enhance. We need to put in the manpower, but again, it's a lot of fun. Dark effects are more prominent on a light base coat, so the results are more immediate and striking, and thus the process is more enjoyable. And I need to mention that so far we didn't use any masking, and I'll keep bragging about it a lot in this video. And again, because the superstructure needs to be mirror smooth, otherwise you're not a serious aircraft modeler, I gently sanded everything down, especially all the mess left over by the sponges. I don't know if I followed the tutorials correctly, but I suppose the essence of the technique is there. Let's now apply the top colors and blend things together. This time I also tried to match the colors a little better than before, and my interpretation of the real images is that everything is grayish and desaturated, so I went with that. I won't try to give you too many specific paint callouts because I honestly don't remember them, but I kept using the same paint mixtures which I stored in bottles, and I was just adding various other shades to them, mainly grays and blues and stuff like that. Again, no masking, just a small airbrush with a 0.2mm nozzle, lots of lacquer thinner, and very low pressures. This all in itself kinda starts to look like that trademark aircraft modeler finish, with all the smooth color transitions, nuances, and other cool stuff, but it doesn't quite look like the references. So at this point, I was starting to enter a mild existential crisis. On one hand, I was liking the result, sort of, and on the other, it was far from the finish I had in mind. So much so that my wheel was actually getting broken, and I resorted to masking. Honestly, this blue patch is my favorite part of the plane, even though I completely missed the shade and instead of navy blue, I ended up with this sort of almost turquoise looking thing. There's a strange charm to the process of peeling off the tape and seeing the result, especially when the result is quite subtle. Long story short, the finish wasn't grey enough, so I resorted to post shading. Long story short, I combined pretty much every painting method that I've used in the recent past, but long story short, it was still far from the result I had envisioned. Long story short, when I hit a dead end, I don't fight it, because when I enter tryhard mode, things start to go downhill really fast. Long story short, I decided that this was the final result of the airbrushing stage and proceeded to do things I'm actually good at. Long story short, acrylics and paintbrushes. Let me say right off the bat that this step, unless you're confident, could end the entire project and send it to the trash bin. I mean, painting these awful looking patches of random paint on an aircraft is the definition of heresy. To prove my point, I painted an inverted cross on one of the engines. Just kidding, of course, they did it on the real one as well. My original plan was to paint all of these as best as I could, and then, I don't know, somehow blend them in and make them look weathered with oils and washes or something like that. But by sheer accident, I discovered a technique that changed my whole view on life and universe. You see, I was going to smoothen each patch with a sponge, but decided to add a bit of water because, the sanding would be gentler, right? Well, would you know it? The paint started chipping off in the most realistic way imaginable. And it wasn't just with the sanding sponge, I could do it with a toothpick. Sure, while it's dry, you can nicely polish it, but oh my goodness. The accidental technique changed the course of the entire model, nay, the entire diorama, and just like that, I found a direction. None of the effects you'll see in this video had any chipping fluid involved. It was all just acrylics, tap water, sandpaper and toothpicks. This, by the way, might or might not be rust. I don't know, I'm just replicating what I see in references. The technique requires only one thing though. The coat underneath must be sturdy, like lacquer paint sturdy or Tamiya acrylic diluted with Mr. Leveling thinner sturdy. The AK 3rd gen acrylics are much softer, so when you're rubbing the surface, you're only attacking those. This method is a huge time saver, because otherwise I'd have to apply chipping fluid to each area, wait for it to dry, then carefully, somehow, brush these patches, which I try to paint as accurately as possible by the way, and then create the chipping with a stiff brush and water. But this way, I could do whatever I wanted, in as many layers as I pleased. So I went ahead and started experimenting and seeing what else can be done with it. Here I tried applying thin filters of diluted paint on each of the wing flaps, again according to references, and then I moistened the surface and gently rubbed it with the microfine sanding sponge. The technique always leaves a lot of mess, so we have to remove the filthy water. This absolute abomination of a paint job was very quickly transformed into a pretty interesting finish. You see how I was becoming more and more confident with it, right? I can't wait to use this on a tank or on a building. As you can imagine, the majority of the craft was treated in this same manner. The thickness of the paint coat and the pressure you apply to it determines the final result. So you can end up with something subtle yet gritty such as this, or something that seems to be intense, but you can quickly rub most of it down, leaving a nice textured finish in its wake, like this. As you can imagine, this was extremely fun, but time consuming, because I was trying to replicate each section accurately. The model kinda resembles the real thing now, but it's still a bit flat and lacks definition. I mean, the real one looks like someone vomited paint water all over it, but it's hard to resist a good chill round of pin washes. And for that, I'll go with the sepia panel liner, one of the best time savers I recently discovered. Check out the applicator brush. Don't stab yourself if you get one. And that wasn't warning, that was a call to action. Because you guessed it, the panel liners, AK 3rd gen, enamel washes, upstyling oils, and pretty much everything I'm working with in this video can be bought through the affiliate link down below with a discount code. Each purchase helps me out, and in return you'll treat yourself with some excellent paints. The precise applicator and extremely low surface tension of the panel liners make them really easy to work with. That's on one hand. There's not a lot of cleanup needed, but I actually wanted to have a messy surface. No worries though, because I'll do that in a moment with enamel washes. Another cool thing is that the panel liner dries really quickly, and I mean really dries, like bites down. So it's better to work in small segments, because if you get caught off guard, you might not be able to wipe off the excess. However, if you keep track of it, you'll be able to turn it to your advantage. There's not much else to say here, because the process is really simple and fast, but the model didn't look as dramatic as I was hoping for, mainly due to its plain and smooth shape, so I proceeded to the next stage. Oil paints, although just 3 of them. I used the blue one as a filter on these unfortunate, yet still my favorite sections. 3 filters gave them more of that navy blue tone, but they still weren't dark enough. Again, I know better than to go with my head against the wall, so I called it and proceeded with the other effects. Some of these were already sketched out during the textured pre-post shading, so finishing them was really easy. I just followed the roadmap and did some quick blending. I also used the dark rust streaks enamel paint, and this part made me really proud because it proved my point that you can definitely use some nasty rust effects on an aircraft. A lot of this stage was just jumping from one section to the other, slowly adjusting the finish and enhancing the contrast where it was lacking. I was constantly looking at my references, and although at this point I knew the model won't be a carbon copy of the real thing, I was still okay with it. It's an interpretation, okay? And that's it, or rather, That's it? Don't worry, I kept asking the same question for several hours when each time I entered my studio and just looked at the model because at this point there was nothing else to add that I could think of. So I ripped off the tape from the windows, no problems there, thank goodness, and you might have been wondering what did I do with the underside of the hull. Well, I painted it, sort of, in a rudimentary way, but only what could be visible in the end. So I glued the running gear in place with PVA glue, which gave me enough time to line things up correctly, and added a few more stains on the glazes area, which could be possibly visible if you look at it from a low enough angle. That's actually the last time anyone will ever see the belly of the Spirit, because this model is meant to be observed from directly above. What makes me sure about that? Well, I'll show you. The diorama for it will be a picture frame, and yes, you're meant to hang the finished piece on a wall like a 3D painting. The scenery will be an airfield from the references, so everything will be made from cork. I've cut it into 5x5cm pieces, a rough estimate from photos, and this would make them absolute GigaChad 7x7 meter concrete panels in real life. I like this type of putty a lot because it has, like, something in it. I tried to apply it as smoothly as possible, considering the 1/44 scale, and once it was dry, each panel was sanded down. I didn't fuss too much about composition because it was simple. I wanted to stylize the diorama as an aerial photograph or a snapshot from Google Earth and present the model as a framed picture. As such, everything is lined with the frame and nicely centered. Considering the scale, I glued them as closely together as physically possible. And for a brief moment, I considered making the entire base from a large piece of scribed plastic, but I think this custom, slightly imperfect look will always look a bit more authentic. The curbs are made from 2mm plastic strips from AK. Again, the small scale allows us to keep many things simplified. If things were any bigger, I'd have to make these from cork or styrofoam, and I'd be able to play around with their textures and some subtle damage, but this will suffice. Lastly, I had to fill the gaps, but any type of fine gravel would be too coarse in this scale, so I went with VMS Holtex, which is originally designed for recreating anti-slip coating on modern tanks. It was all held in place with AK gravel and sand fixer and left to dry overnight. The next morning, I sanded the surface one more time because some loose grains were stuck to the concrete, and then it was time to start painting. You can see how the porous surface of the putty contrasts with the areas affected by the gravel fixer, so I kept spraying more primer until the surface was homogeneous. Let's now paint the concrete with enamel washes. That's right, make a list. And our tools of choice will be sponges. This method has a big advantage over acrylics because as you keep layering the enamels on top of each other, they'll reactivate the previous layers and start mixing together irregularly, creating new colors. And vary the intensity on each panel if we want more color variation. Before we move any further, when I was in Greece, I had a chat with the owner of modelers.gr, a modeling online store that does international shipping. It's a very nice site, it also comes in English, and they have tons of models and paints, so please check them out if you need something. Now we'll cover the entire surface with the Black Knight acrylic wash. The enamels are dry to the touch, but they're not fully dry, so the surface is still a bit shiny and sticky. You can see how it affects the wash, like it sort of beads up on the surface, but I just made sure to rub it down really well, and eventually I achieved a uniform coverage. The acrylic will create a thin film on the surface. Working on such a large surface is a monotonous job, so I didn't even have to look at it, and instead I doom scrolled my Instagram reels. And now, just as before on the B2, it's time to moisten the surface with tap water and rub it down real good with a sanding sponge. This whole project seems to be defined by this technique, but honestly, I'm not even ashamed of that. Controlled mechanical weathering is absolutely bonkers, and you must try it out if the model allows it, because obviously if the model is extremely complex, you won't be able to do much rubbing without breaking something off. I also rubbed the surface with a dry towel to remove any remnants of the undried enamels. To wrap things up, I applied the sepia panel liner, trying to be as precise as possible, because if I had to clean up any spills, it would reactivate the enamel paints, and we don't want that. So that's the basic painting. It took a while because it's a big diorama, but the techniques are simple. Definitely try them out. Masking was unavoidable on this project, but I'm proud to say that the majority of it was done on the base, not on the aircraft. If I had to paint these spots using the hairspray method, I'd probably lose my mind because of the constant back and forth. This way, I just had to load the airbrush with German grey or yellow or white from Tamiya, spray them, rub the areas down as usual, and then, if needed, spray them some more to tone the weather texture down. I had to be careful with the tape because the uncured enamel base coat was still a bit fragile, and if I didn't remove most of the adhesive from the tape by first sticking it to my t-shirt and my workbench, it could leave some visible marks on the concrete. However, I stopped worrying about that because the patterns actually looked pretty nice, like additional weathering on the concrete. And what really made my day brighter was the ability to add very realistic cracks in the painted surface with nothing but a toothpick. Sure, these can be applied with a pointy paintbrush, but that requires skill. This doesn't require anything, just water and a toothpick. Also, removing the tape is a special form of visual ASMR, but I'm sure every aircraft modeler already knows that. Adding very subtle weathering effects to the paint is much more satisfying though. Check out how the yellow strip looks way more realistic than the rest. It's perfectly integrated into the surface. Curbs were painted with a sponge because I didn't want to mess around with more tape, and after these were done, it was time for some finishing touches. I applied more of the black acrylic wash in selected areas, basically just adding contrast between each panel and giving them different levels of weathering, and the final, crucial step was picking out the edges with ivory. The subtle jagged edges of each panel were created with the acrylic putty and sanding, but it was only now that I fully started to appreciate them. Ivory is much more subtle than off-white or pure white, making it an ideal color for jobs like this. When I was done with the base, I drilled 2 securing holes for the Spirit that go all the way through the MDF backing, and I did the same on the model. Honestly, it was quite unnerving because I was worried that the drill bit would come out of its bag, and the whole point of this surgery was to add 2mm thick plastic rods that would secure it to the base as firmly as it can get. And because now I had the exact position of the plane on the ground, I could apply the grimy outline it left on the concrete. And you probably saw this coming, but obviously I rubbed it down with a sanding sponge because everything in this diorama needs to have some texture. So with everything finished, let's add some airfield accessories, such as this tow truck from Rise 144. It's the best 3D printed accessory I've ever seen. The sharpness of every detail is absolutely bonkers, and the assembly is a breeze because everything fits perfectly. I designed and printed some of my own accessories, loosely interpreting the reference images, but unfortunately, the portable staircase was too fragile for the technology. Painting a model of this size is not complicated at all. It's supposed to be a relatively clean vehicle, so the weathering is not gonna make our lives any more difficult, and the majority of the workload is taken up by detail painting. The kit actually comes with decals, but I was too lazy to mess around with those, so I just painted everything by hand. The anti-slip surface on the roof actually has some subtle texture, and that's absolutely incredible considering the size of this thing. I only added a few subtle stains with streaking rime enamel wash, and that was pretty much it. What do you think? Pretty cute, huh? If things allowed it, I fixed everything to the base through a hole. It's gonna hang on the wall, so the extra firmness and a mechanical joint is always welcome. I also added hoses from photos. These are made from 0.4 and 0.3mm lead wires, shaped directly on the base. The shiny connectors are just painted on, they're fake. The advantages of small scale, am I right? All of the airfield accessories were painted the same way as the tow truck. I just didn't like how they looked though, and considered not adding them in the end at all. But luckily, I think the issue was solved when I blended some more acrylic black wash underneath as a form of fake shadow of sorts. It's a subtle effect that visually integrated them with the base, or at least that's how I saw it. So with that out of the way, the aircraft project was done. The picture frame gives it that weird art piece vibe, but yeah, my mission is over. It's not easy to present the final result in an attractive way on video because you're really just meant to look at it straight ahead from bird's eye perspective, so please excuse my improvised presentation like this. What I want to know the most are your opinions on the result. How did I do with my first aircraft model, and what do you think about the composition of the scene? I had this framed picture idea in mind for many years, and I also always wanted to build this B2 test article. Since I saw a picture of it, I knew that if one day I ever build an aircraft, this will be the one. Ultimately, I didn't use too many aircraft painting techniques and finished the model more like an armor model, or even more accurately, as a facade. And it also made me appreciate armor models a lot more, and now I can't wait to paint another tank. So in the meantime, thank you all for your support. Your continued interest over the years gave me purpose and made me into a genuinely happy person, and I'll never be able to thank you enough. And special thanks goes to my patrons because their help allows me to buy excessive amounts of IKEA cork sheets. And if you're one of them, thank you so much, because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be able to run this small modeling business for a living. By the way, check out my personal website where I sell my models, although this one was sold even before I started painting it, but it's still worth checking out because I have all of my models there. And I also have a humble line of merch, so if you want a comfortable t-shirt with my logo, go and take a look, links in the description. You'll get a lot of cool stuff if you join me on Patreon. I post regular updates, share work in progress photos, various thoughts and observations from the workbench, and we keep in touch through DMs, comments, and emails. Top tier patrons get early access to all of my videos completely ad-free, and also my Patreon exclusive video format called Night Shift Throwback, where I go back to the latest video and talk about every technique and interesting part in long, winded, detailed monologues. These videos are usually an hour long, making them perfect to listen to while you're modeling. I also plan to add more exclusive content there in the nearby future, so if you're interested, check it out. There are also bonus extras like 3D printable parts for your models, reference photos from real life, and high-res studio shots of my models that show way more detail than video ever could. And in this particular case, the outside shots with the realistic shadows are really top-notch, if I do say so myself. Your financial support is appreciated, but never expected. Anyway, this Friday is our wedding, so keep me in mind please, because I don't want to mess up my steps during the first dance. Not many people know this, but I'm the worst dancer on the planet. So bad that if I don't dance, I'm actually doing everyone involved a favor. Anyway, I'm extremely happy and stoked, and I can't wait to start painting my Object 279 as Husband Night Shift. And remember, build your models, don't just hoard them. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!